You're kneeling on cold stone in a shadowy courtyard somewhere deep within the forbidden city. The morning mist clings to ancient walls like the ghosts of those who came before you. Your hands shake as you stare down at the crude bronze blade gleaming in the pale light. The man standing over you speaks in measured tones about honor and service to the emperor, but his words sound distant and hollow. Your mind reels with the impossibility of what's about to happen. You're 13 years old, and in the next few minutes, everything that makes you who you are will be stripped away with a single cut. The smell of incense burns your nostrils, meant to purify this unholy ritual, but nothing can mask the metallic scent of fear and blood that permeates this place. Other boys have knelt where you kneel now, thousands of them over the centuries. Some survived to serve in the imperial palace. Others bled to death on this very stone. You wonder which fate awaits you as the blade catches the light and the executioner tests its edge with his thumb. This was the reality for countless young men in Ming Dynasty China. Not the romanticized version you might see in period dramas, where palace eunuchs glide through silk-draped halls wielding political power. The truth was far more brutal, far more devastating than any Hollywood production would dare to show. Behind the golden walls of the Forbidden City existed a system that consumed young lives and twisted them into something unrecognizable, all in service to an empire that valued obedience above humanity. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The path to that stone courtyard began long before you understood what was happening. Perhaps your family lived in one of the countless villages scattered across the Chinese countryside, where life moved according to the rhythm of rice harvests and imperial taxes. Maybe your father was a minor merchant whose business had failed, or a farmer whose crops had withered under an unforgiving sun. In Ming China, desperation wore many faces, but they all led to the same terrible mathematics of survival. Picture a small farming community nestled between terraced rice fields that climb the hillsides like green staircases to heaven. The houses are simple wooden structures with upturned tile roofs, their walls paper-thin and their floors packed earth. Children chase chickens through narrow alleys, while their mothers grind grain and tend cooking fires. The air smells of wood smoke and steaming rice, punctuated by the distant sound of temple bells marking the hours. Then comes the drought, or the flood, or the plague of locusts that devours everything green. Perhaps it's the tax collector demanding payment that exceeds your family's entire yearly income. Maybe it's raiders from the north, or bandits from the hills, or simply the cruel arithmetic of too many mouths and not enough food. Whatever the catalyst, the result is always the same. Families begin looking at their children with new eyes, calculating which ones might be worth more sold than fed. The palace recruiters arrive like merchants of flesh, their silk robes and official seals marking them as representatives of imperial power. They set up in the village square, unfurling scrolls that promise opportunity and advancement for young men willing to serve the Son of Heaven. They speak of positions in the Forbidden City, of proximity to power, of the chance to rise above humble origins and achieve influence beyond a peasant's wildest dreams. What they don't mention, what the beautiful calligraphy on their recruitment scrolls carefully omits, is the price of admission to this rarefied world. They don't explain that service in the inner palace requires a sacrifice so profound that it transforms boys into something neither fully male nor female, suspended forever in a liminal space between identities. They certainly don't describe the procedure itself, The crude tools, the lack of medical care, the horrific mortality rate that claims roughly half of all candidates. Instead, they focus on the success stories. They tell tales of eunuchs who rose to become trusted advisors to emperors, who accumulated vast wealth and wielded influence that reached every corner of the empire. They speak of Zheng He, the famous eunuch admiral who commanded treasure fleets that sailed to the edges of the known world. They mention the eunuch bureaucrats who governed provinces and commanded armies, whose names were spoken with respect in the highest circles of power. These stories aren't lies exactly, but they're incomplete truths that hide more than they reveal. Yes, some eunuchs achieved remarkable positions, but for every success story there were hundreds of broken boys who died during the cutting, who succumbed to infection in the days that followed, or who survived the procedure only to spend their lives as powerless servants invisible to history. Your parents listen to these recruiters with the desperate attention of people drowning in circumstances beyond their control. They see the silver coins counted out on the wooden table, enough to pay their debts and keep the family fed through another harsh winter. They hear promises of their son's future advancement, of letters and money sent home from the imperial capital. They want to believe that selling you into this service is an act of love rather than desperation. The negotiations proceed with the cold efficiency of any business transaction. The recruiters examine you like livestock, checking your teeth, testing your reflexes, evaluating your potential for the specific kind of service they require. They prefer boys between 10 and 14, young enough that the physical and psychological trauma might be overcome, old enough to understand basic instructions and survive the journey to Beijing. They look for intelligence in your eyes, signs that you might be capable of learning the complex protocols that govern palace life. They check for physical defects that might make you unsuitable for imperial service. Most importantly, they assess your family's financial desperation, calculating exactly how little they can offer while still securing your cooperation. The contract, when it comes, is written in official language that your illiterate parents cannot read. They trust the village scribe to explain the terms, not realizing that he receives a small payment from the recruiters for each successful transaction. The document speaks of 10 years of service, of regular payments to your family, of opportunities for advancement based on merit and loyalty. What it doesn't mention is that the service begins with a mutilation so severe that many boys don't survive it. It doesn't explain that the payments to your family will cease if you die during the procedure, leaving them with nothing but the memory of a son sold and lost. It doesn't describe the psychological torment that awaits those who do survive, the constant reminder of what was taken from them every time they look in a mirror or attempt to form relationships with others. On the day of your departure, your mother weeps while your father stands stoically aside, unable to meet your eyes. Your younger siblings don't fully understand what's happening, but they sense the finality in the air, the feeling that something precious is being lost forever. You're given a small bundle of belongings and a few copper coins for the journey, pathetic tokens that feel like mockery in the face of what's about to unfold. The journey to Beijing takes weeks, a slow procession of carts and walking that carries you further from everything familiar with each passing day. You travel with other boys, some younger than yourself, others a few years older, all bearing the same expression of confused terror. The recruiters maintain discipline through a combination of false kindness and casual brutality, offering small treats and privileges while making clear that disobedience will result in swift punishment. Along the way, you begin to understand the true nature of your situation. Older boys, those making the journey for the second or third time as failed candidates who somehow survived their previous attempts, whisper stories that freeze your blood. They describe the cutting procedure in clinical detail, the crude instruments, the absence of proper medical care. They speak of boys who screamed until their voices gave out, who begged for death as infection set in, who simply disappeared one night when their suffering became too much for the handlers to ignore. These veterans of the system share survival strategies with a mixture of cynicism and desperate hope. They explain how to prepare mentally for the procedure, how to focus on something beyond the immediate pain, how to recognize the signs of infection that might kill you in the days that follow. Their advice is practical, but horrifying, the accumulated wisdom of children forced to become experts in their own mutilation. As the walls of Beijing rise before you, massive and imposing beyond anything your village mind could have imagined, you realize that you're approaching the point of no return. Once you pass through those gates, once you enter the machinery of the imperial system, there will be no going back to the life you once knew. You will either emerge transformed into something unrecognizable, or you will join the countless others whose bones lie buried in unmarked graves outside the city walls. The Forbidden City itself defies comprehension when you first glimpse it through the morning mist. Acre upon acre of buildings with golden tile roofs, separated by courtyards so vast they seem to stretch to the horizon. Walls painted in deep reds and brilliant yellows, decorated with dragons and phoenixes that seem to writhe in the shifting light. Gardens with trees shaped into impossible forms, bridges arching over artificial streams, pavilions that appear to float like dreams above reflecting pools. This is the heart of the Chinese Empire, the residence of the Son of Heaven himself, a place where every stone and timber has been arranged according to principles of harmony and power that ordinary mortals cannot hope to understand. It's beautiful beyond imagination and terrible beyond words, a paradise built on the suffering of those deemed expendable by the cosmic order. You're processed through a series of courtyards and buildings, each one bringing you closer to your final destination. Officials in silk robes examine documents, stamp papers, make notations in ledgers that will record your transformation from free boy to imperial property. Everything moves with bureaucratic efficiency, as if the systematic destruction of human lives is just another administrative task to be completed before the evening meal. Other boys move through the same process around you, their faces bearing expressions ranging from numb resignation to wild-eyed terror. Some weep openly, while others maintain a stoic silence that speaks of spirits already broken. A few attempt desperate bargains with their handlers, offering information about their families or promising future loyalty in exchange for release that will never come. The waiting is almost worse than the fear of what's to come. You're housed in dormitories with dozens of other candidates, sleeping on hard wooden platforms while guards watch from the shadows. The food is adequate but tasteless, designed to maintain your physical condition without providing any comfort or pleasure. Everything about the environment is calculated to break down your sense of individual identity, to prepare you for the transformation that will remake you into an instrument of imperial will. During these final days, some boys attempt escape, scaling walls or hiding in storage rooms, clinging to the desperate hope that they might somehow find their way back to families and villages that now exist only in memory. These attempts invariably fail, ending with public punishments that serve as object lessons for the others. The message is clear. There is no escape from the path you've chosen, no alternative to the fate that awaits you in that shadowy courtyard where other boys have knelt before you. The medical preparation begins 3 days before the procedure itself, though calling it medical feels like a cruel mockery of actual healing arts. Palace physicians examine you with the detached interest of butchers evaluating livestock, checking your pulse, examining your skin for signs of disease, testing your reflexes to ensure you're healthy enough to survive what they're about to inflict upon you. They force you to fast for 24 hours before the cutting, claiming this reduces the risk of complications, though you suspect it's simply easier to handle unconscious boys than those writhing in agony. The hunger gnaws at your belly, but it's nothing compared to the fear that consumes every other thought. Sleep becomes impossible as the appointed hour approaches, your mind cycling through scenarios of pain and death that seem to grow more vivid with each passing moment. The night before your transformation, you're moved to a smaller chamber closer to the surgical courtyard. The walls here are stained with substances you don't want to identify, and the air carries scents that make your stomach clench with nausea. Other boys scheduled for the same day lie on mats around you, some praying to gods who seem to have abandoned this place, others staring at the ceiling with eyes that have already accepted death as preferable to what's coming. An older eunuch visits during these final hours, his face a mask of practiced indifference that can't quite hide the memory of his own suffering. He speaks in measured tones about the honor of serving the emperor, about the privileges that await those who survive and prove themselves worthy of advancement. But his words ring hollow in this chamber of approaching horror, and you notice how his hands shake slightly when he thinks no one is watching. He explains the procedure with clinical precision that makes it somehow worse than ignorance. The cutting will be swift, he promises, performed by experienced surgeons who have done this thousands of times before. You'll be given wine mixed with herbs to dull the pain, though he admits it provides only minimal relief. The wound will be cauterized immediately to prevent bleeding, then packed with special materials to promote healing and prevent infection. What he doesn't say, what hovers unspoken in the stale air between you, is that roughly half the boys who undergo this procedure will be dead within a week. Infection, blood loss, shock, and simple despair claim victims with ruthless efficiency. The imperial system has calculated these losses into their recruitment numbers, ordering twice as many candidates as they actually need to account for the inevitable mortality. The morning arrives with the inexorable certainty of sunrise, though the sky remains gray and overcast, as if the heavens themselves disapprove of what's about to unfold. Guards wake you before dawn, their movements efficient and impersonal as they prepare you for transport to the surgical courtyard. You're given a simple white robe to wear, the color of mourning and death, symbolic of the boy who will die today even if your body somehow survives. The courtyard where your transformation awaits has witnessed this ritual countless times before. The stone beneath your feet is stained dark with the blood of previous victims, scrubbed clean but never truly pure. Incense burners release clouds of sandalwood smoke that's meant to purify the space, but only serves to create a dreamlike haze that makes everything feel unreal and nightmarish. The surgeon who will perform your cutting is a thin man with steady hands and dead eyes who moves with the mechanical precision of someone who has performed this operation so many times it has become mere routine. He examines his instruments with professional detachment, testing the sharpness of blades and checking the temperature of cauterizing irons that glow red-hot in portable braziers. Around the courtyard, other officials observe the proceedings with varying degrees of interest and revulsion. Some are palace administrators who need to witness the procedure to verify its completion for their records. Others appear to be curious courtiers who view the systematic mutilation of children as a form of entertainment, their silk robes and powdered faces creating an obscene contrast to the brutality they've come to observe. You're forced to drink a cup of rice wine mixed with herbs that burns your throat and makes your vision blur at the edges. The alcohol provides minimal relief from the terror that grips every fiber of your being, but it does create a strange sense of detachment, as if you're watching these events happen to someone else from a great distance. The herbs are supposed to dull pain and prevent infection, though their effectiveness seems questionable given the mortality rates. The actual cutting happens faster than you expected and slower than you can bear. The surgeon works with practiced efficiency, but every second stretches into an eternity of agony that transcends anything you believed possible. The pain is so intense it becomes abstract, a pure sensation that overwhelms every other thought and feeling until nothing exists but the fire consuming your body. The cauterization that follows feels like molten metal poured directly into your wounds, the searing heat designed to seal blood vessels and prevent you from bleeding to death on the surgical stone. The smell of burning flesh mingles with incense smoke, creating an atmosphere that feels more like a scene from hell than any earthly medical procedure. Through waves of pain and shock, you're dimly aware of being carried to a recovery chamber where dozens of other boys lie in various stages of healing or dying. Some moan constantly, their voices raw from screaming. Others lie silent and still, their faces gray with blood loss and infection. A few seem to be recovering, but they stare at the ceiling with empty eyes that suggest their spirits died even if their bodies survived. The days that follow blur together in a haze of fever, delirium, and pain that seems to emanate from your very soul. Palace physicians check your wounds with clinical disinterest, changing bandages and applying ointments that sting like acid. They record your progress in ledgers that reduce your suffering to mere data points, noting whether you're likely to survive or should be moved to the chambers where the dying are left to expire in privacy. Recovery, when it finally comes, brings its own special torments. The physical wounds heal slowly, leaving scars that will mark your body for the remainder of your days. But the psychological trauma cuts deeper than any surgeon's blade, creating wounds that may never fully close. You've been transformed into something that fits no natural category, neither man nor woman, but a third thing created solely to serve imperial power. The other surviving boys become your only family now, bound together by shared trauma that no one else could possibly understand. You develop ways of communicating that don't require words, subtle gestures, and expressions that convey sympathy, warning, or simple acknowledgement of each other's continued existence. These relationships become lifelines in an environment designed to strip away every vestige of human dignity and connection. Training begins before your body has fully healed, because the imperial system cannot afford to waste time on sentiment or recovery. You must learn the complex protocols that govern palace life, memorizing thousands of rules about proper behavior, speech, posture, and movement. Every aspect of your existence becomes regulated by customs so intricate they seem designed more to torment than to organize. The hierarchy within the eunuch system proves as brutal as anything you experienced during your physical transformation. Older eunuchs who have survived decades in the palace wield their seniority like weapons, using their knowledge of protocol and their connections to powerful officials to maintain dominance over newer arrivals. They've learned that in a world where they have no real power, the ability to make others suffer becomes a precious commodity. Some of these veteran eunuchs take pleasure in describing the fates that await those who fail to adapt to palace life. They speak of boys who were executed for minor breaches of protocol, who disappeared one night after accidentally glimpsing something they weren't meant to see, who slowly went insane from the psychological pressure and were quietly disposed of to prevent their madness from spreading to others. But they also share strategies for survival that prove invaluable in navigating the treacherous currents of court politics. They explain how to read the subtle signs that indicate an official's mood, how to position yourself to overhear important conversations without appearing to eavesdrop, how to make yourself useful without becoming threatening to those who hold real power. The education you receive extends far beyond mere protocol and etiquette. Promising eunuchs are taught reading and writing, mathematics and accounting, history and literature. The palace needs educated servants to handle its vast bureaucracy, to manage its financial affairs, to serve as secretaries and advisors to officials who must focus on larger matters of state. This intellectual training becomes both blessing and curse, opening your mind to ideas and possibilities while simultaneously making you more aware of your trapped circumstances. Literacy allows you to read the histories of previous dynasties, learning about the cycles of rise and fall that have characterized Chinese civilization for millennia. But this knowledge only emphasizes your own powerlessness, your complete dependence on the whims of an imperial system that views you as expendable property. Mathematics lessons reveal the vast wealth that flows through imperial coffers while you survive on rice, gruel, and scraps. You learn to calculate tribute payments from distant provinces, to track the costs of military campaigns, to manage budgets for palace construction projects that consume more silver than your village would see in 100 lifetimes. The irony cuts deep as you realize you're helping to maintain the very system that destroyed your humanity for the price of a few coins paid to desperate parents. Your first assignment comes after months of training, a simple task that nonetheless fills you with terror. You're to serve tea during a meeting between high-ranking officials, moving silently around the chamber while powerful men discuss matters of state. The room fills with tobacco smoke and whispered conversations about tax collection, military appointments, and the emperor's latest architectural obsessions. Standing in the shadows with a silver teapot, you're struck by how ordinary these men appear despite wielding life-and-death authority over millions. They complain about their wives, discuss their investments, argue over minor points of ceremony with the petty intensity of merchants haggling over rice prices. Yet these same individuals can order executions with a casual word, can destroy entire families through administrative decree, can reshape the lives of countless subjects according to their personal preferences. The invisibility that comes with your transformed state proves both protection and torment. Officials speak freely in your presence as if you're merely another piece of furniture, revealing secrets that could topple governments or destroy reputations. You learn about corruption schemes that drain the imperial treasury, about military preparations against rebellious provinces, about palace intrigues involving concubines and succession disputes. This knowledge becomes a dangerous burden that weighs heavier with each passing day. You understand too much about the mechanisms of power, see too clearly the gap between public proclamations of virtue and private acts of selfishness. The officials who speak eloquently about Confucian morality in public forums reveal themselves as petty, cruel, and utterly indifferent to the suffering their policies create among common people. Some eunuchs attempt to use such information for personal advancement, carefully revealing selected secrets to rivals who might reward such intelligence with better positions or small privileges. This game requires extraordinary skill and carries enormous risks, as being caught in such machinations usually results in immediate execution. The palace walls contain countless stories of clever eunuchs who overreached and paid with their lives. Your sleeping quarters in the eunuch dormitories provide no respite from the psychological pressure that permeates every aspect of palace life. Dozens of men who were once boys like yourself lie on hard wooden platforms, their dreams filled with nightmares that echo the trauma of their transformation. Some weep silently in the darkness, while others stare at ceiling beams with expressions of such profound emptiness that they seem already dead. Conversations in these chambers reveal the full scope of what the cutting ceremony stole from each survivor. Men speak longingly of families they'll never have, of children they'll never father, of the simple human connections that were severed along with their manhood. The wine they sometimes smuggle into the dormitories provides temporary escape from these realizations, but morning always brings the same bitter awakening to their altered reality. Suicide becomes a constant temptation that stalks through the corridors like an invisible predator. Palace officials maintain careful watch for signs of despair that might lead to self-destruction, not from compassion but from practical concerns about losing their investment in trained personnel. Eunuchs who show symptoms of mental collapse are often transferred to remote positions or simply disappeared before their condition can spread to others. The few who attempt escape face punishments designed to serve as object lessons for anyone harboring similar thoughts. You witness the public flogging of a young eunuch who tried to flee the palace disguised as a merchant, his screams echoing through courtyards while officials force other servants to watch. The message proves unmistakable. There exists no life beyond these walls for those who have undergone the transformation. Religious observances in the palace take on grotesque dimensions when filtered through the lens of systematic cruelty. Temple ceremonies celebrate the emperor's divine mandate while ignoring the human cost of maintaining his power. Monks chant prayers for prosperity and harmony, while eunuchs kneel nearby, living contradictions to every principle of natural order and cosmic balance. Buddhist teachings about suffering and impermanence acquire bitter irony when delivered to audiences whose suffering serves purely secular purposes. The promise of eventual liberation through enlightenment sounds like mockery to men whose earthly existence has been deliberately constrained within narrow boundaries of service and submission. Even prayer becomes tainted when offered in spaces built on foundations of systematic abuse. Palace festivals celebrating imperial birthdays or military victories force eunuchs to participate in elaborate displays of joy and loyalty that feel like additional forms of torture. You're required to smile and bow while officials toast the glory of a system that consumed your childhood and transformed you into a hollow shell of human potential. The silk costumes and golden decorations create beautiful surfaces that conceal the horror underneath. During these celebrations, imperial concubines sometimes appear at windows or behind screens, their painted faces and elaborate hairstyles representing another category of human being, reshaped to serve imperial pleasure. The parallel between their situation and yours becomes uncomfortably clear. Both groups exist solely to fulfill the emperor's needs, their individual desires and identities subordinated completely to his whims. The seasonal rhythms of palace life create their own forms of psychological torture, as months blur into years without meaningful change or progress. Spring brings ceremonies welcoming new life, while you remain forever separated from the possibility of creating life yourself. Summer festivals celebrate fertility and abundance, while your own body stands as monument to deliberate sterility. Autumn inspections review the performance of palace personnel with the cold efficiency of military reviews. Eunuchs who have failed to meet expectations simply vanish from their positions, their fate never officially acknowledged but understood by all who remain. The survivors learn to perform gratitude for the privilege of continued existence, thanking officials who view them as slightly more valuable than livestock. Winter isolation in the palace becomes particularly oppressive, as shortened days and bitter cold mirror the emotional landscape of your transformed existence. The courtyards fill with snow that covers the bloodstains on ancient stones, but never truly cleanses them. Ice forms on windows like frozen tears, creating barriers between the warmth inside and the hostile world beyond. Administrative duties gradually expand as you prove your competence and reliability in handling sensitive information. You're assigned to copy confidential documents, to maintain records of tribute payments, to draft routine correspondence that carries the weight of imperial authority. The beautiful calligraphy you've mastered serves to disguise orders that will cause suffering in distant provinces. These responsibilities provide glimpses into the vast machinery of empire that extends far beyond the palace walls. You learn about famines in southern provinces where officials have diverted grain shipments for personal profit. You read reports about peasant uprisings brutally suppressed by imperial armies. You copy orders for massive construction projects that will require forced labor from thousands of conscripted workers. Each document processed becomes another weight on your conscience as you understand your complicity in maintaining systems of oppression that extend across the entire empire. Your skilled hands and educated mind serve purposes that cause suffering on scales you never imagined possible. The boy who once tended goats in peaceful mountains now helps administer policies that destroy similar families in countless other villages. Career advancement within the eunuch hierarchy requires navigating political currents that shift with deadly unpredictability. Promising too little initiative marks you as useless. Showing too much ambition brands you as dangerous. The successful eunuchs learn to position themselves as indispensable to powerful patrons while avoiding actions that might threaten those patrons' positions. Some eunuchs achieve remarkable influence by becoming trusted confidants to high officials who value their inability to create competing dynasties. These relationships can provide protection and privilege, but they also create new vulnerabilities as political fortunes rise and fall. A eunuch closely associated with a disgraced official often shares that official's fate, regardless of his personal innocence or guilt. The most successful eunuchs develop networks of information and influence that span the entire palace complex. They cultivate relationships with servants, guards, concubines, and minor officials, creating webs of mutual obligation that can provide early warning of political changes. These networks require constant maintenance through small favors, shared secrets, and careful attention to the shifting dynamics of court politics. Watching these master manipulators operate provides education in human nature that no formal schooling could match. You learn to read micro-expressions that reveal true intentions behind polite words, to interpret silences that speak louder than proclamations, to recognize the subtle signs that indicate when someone is lying or desperate or dangerous. These skills prove essential for survival, but come at the cost of ever again trusting anyone completely. Medical care in the palace reflects the same dehumanizing attitudes that characterize every other aspect of eunuch existence. Palace physicians treat your ongoing health problems with clinical detachment, viewing your body as imperial property that requires maintenance rather than as a human being deserving compassion. The chronic pain from your surgical wounds receives minimal attention unless it interferes with your ability to perform assigned duties. Some eunuchs develop additional health complications related to their altered physiology, including bone problems, metabolic disorders, and psychological conditions that palace medicine cannot adequately address. These men become increasingly isolated as their conditions worsen, often dying alone in remote chambers while healthier eunuchs continue their service obligations. The palace maintains detailed records of eunuch mortality rates and replacement needs, treating human lives as statistical data points in administrative calculations. New recruitment drives are scheduled based on projected losses from disease, suicide, execution, and simple despair. Your individual existence becomes merely one entry in ledgers that track the human cost of maintaining imperial power. Seasonal changes bring different forms of suffering as your damaged body struggles to adapt to temperature variations and physical demands that healthy men might handle easily. Winter cold penetrates deeper into bones weakened by surgical trauma. Summer heat becomes almost unbearable when combined with heavy silk robes and ceremonial obligations that require standing motionless for hours. The psychological isolation deepens with each passing year, as the gap widens between your inner life and the role you're forced to play. 2. Public displays of loyalty and contentment become increasingly difficult to maintain as private despair grows more profound. You develop the ability to split your consciousness, allowing part of your mind to retreat into memories and fantasies while your body performs its required functions. Dreams become your only refuge from the waking nightmare of palace existence, though even sleep offers limited escape. Your unconscious mind processes the daily trauma through scenarios that often prove more disturbing than reality. You dream of your village, your family, the life that was stolen from you. But these visions bring pain rather than comfort as you wake to face another day of servitude. The approaching end of your first decade of service brings no hope of release, only the realization that you have decades more of this existence stretching ahead like an endless corridor of suffering. The boy who was sold by desperate parents has become a man trapped forever in a system designed to consume human potential and transform it into instruments of imperial will. The awareness that you have survived what so many others could not brings no satisfaction, only a hollow understanding of what survival truly costs. You've watched dozens of boys die in the recovery chambers, their bodies succumbing to infections, or their spirits simply giving up the struggle to continue existing in this transformed state. Their deaths were perhaps mercies compared to the living death that awaits those who endure. By your 20th year in the palace, you've become what the system intended, a perfectly functioning instrument of imperial administration with no identity beyond your assigned role. The memories of your childhood village have faded to ghostly impressions that feel more like stories heard from strangers than experiences lived by your own body. Your parents' faces blur together with countless other forgotten details from a life that might as well have belonged to someone else entirely. The younger eunuchs look to you now as a veteran survivor, seeking advice about navigating palace politics and managing the chronic despair that gnaws at every transformed soul. You find yourself offering the same hollow reassurances that older eunuchs once gave you, speaking of honor and privilege, while knowing these words are lies designed to make unbearable circumstances seem merely difficult. Some nights, standing at the window of your small chamber overlooking the moonlit courtyards, you calculate the years remaining in your probable lifespan and feel a terror deeper than anything you experienced during your physical transformation. Decades more of this existence stretch ahead. Decades of copying documents that cause suffering, of serving tea to officials who speak casually of destroying lives, of pretending gratitude for the privilege of continued servitude. The palace archives contain records of eunuchs who served for 50 years or more, their entire adult lives consumed by this system of systematic dehumanization. Their final entries describe men so completely hollowed out by decades of psychological torture that death came as a release from existence that had long ceased to have any meaningful content. You understand now that you are following the same trajectory, becoming another statistical entry in the Empire's careful accounting of human cost. The revolution, when it finally comes, arrives not as liberation, but as merely another form of chaos that consumes the innocent along with the guilty. Palace walls that once seemed impregnable crumble under assault from armies that view eunuchs as symbols of imperial corruption rather than victims of imperial cruelty. The new order has no place for men like you, creatures shaped by the old system into forms that cannot exist in any other context. As flames consume the forbidden city and soldiers rampage through corridors where you spent decades in silent service, you realize that your story ends not with redemption or justice, but with simple extinction. The boy who was sold to pay his family's debts, who survived surgical mutilation and psychological torture, who endured decades of systematic dehumanization, dies forgotten among the ruins of an empire that consumed countless lives to maintain its beautiful facades. The records burn along with the buildings, destroying the careful documentation of human suffering that bureaucrats maintained with such meticulous precision. Your name disappears from ledgers that tracked your transformation from child to property to instrument of imperial will, the pain you endured, the dignity you lost, the life you never got to live. All of it vanishes into smoke and ash as if it never existed at all. but perhaps this erasure is its own form of mercy, allowing the boy you once were to finally rest without the burden of remembering what he became. The mountains where you herded goats as a child continue their ancient dance with clouds and seasons, indifferent to human cruelty and human suffering alike. Somewhere in those peaks, in the wind that moves through pine forests and the streams that flow toward distant seas, something of your original self remains untouched by the horror that consumed your earthly existence. The system that destroyed you continues its work in other forms, finding new ways to consume the vulnerable and transform their suffering into power for those who already have too much. The faces change, the methods evolve, but the essential transaction remains constant. Innocents sacrificed on altars built by those who mistake cruelty for strength and call their appetite civilization. Your story echoes through time not as inspiration but as warning, a reminder that behind every golden age lie mountains of unmarked graves filled with those who paid the price for others' glory. The beautiful art and magnificent architecture, the philosophical treatises and poetic masterpieces, all of it built on foundations of human misery so vast that acknowledging it would shatter the comfortable lies societies tell themselves about progress and enlightenment. Tonight, somewhere in the world, another child kneels on cold stone while adults speak of honor and service, their words masking intentions too horrible to name directly. The blade catches the light just as it did centuries ago, and the ancient machinery of systematic cruelty continues its work with the same efficient brutality that has always characterized those who mistake power for righteousness. The ghosts of the Forbidden City whisper their warnings through empty courtyards where tourists now walk, speaking of costs that can never be calculated and prices that should never be paid. They remind us that every civilization's achievements come with hidden expenses, that someone always kneels on those cold stones, while others debate the greater good from the comfort of their unexamined assumptions about human worth and human expendability.